Welcome to IMF Fitness. My name is Dwayne and I'm your host. Today I have co-host Leah Gendro with me and we'll be interviewing Dr. Rosie Carey, a 100-miler athlete, a doctor and an author. We're going to have an open conversation about COVID-19, anxiety and depression, running and consciousness. I hope you guys enjoy it. Listen up, open up and get involved. Welcome to another IMF Podcast. Hello Leah, I'm sitting here with Leah Gendro. She's our co-host today, and we've got a special guest, Dr. Rosie Carey. How are you doing, Rosie?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you for coming. Nice to have you here. We're just chatting about Leah's notepad here. And I was thinking she's the first one with a notepad on our desk, and I watched a podcast last night. It was a Joe Rogan, Jocko Willing podcast. If you haven't seen it, it's brilliant. Mm-hmm. He's like an ex-Navy SEAL, and he wrote a book. I think it's something about leadership, but it is incredible. Mm-hmm. If you don't know who he is, like just go YouTube him and listen to some of his stuff. But Joe had said of all his years of doing podcasting, he was the first guy to ever bring a notebook and put it down. And Jocko just looked at him and was like, I just wanted to be prepared. But in the most serious, like that's who he is, that's how he is. It's like, I think there was a saying in the military, or there is a saying in the military, it's like the 4 Ps or the 5 Ps or something. It's something like preparation or planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. And I was like,
go for medicine
and that's why my notebook is on the table.
Exactly. Good planning.
Thank you. So today, like Dwayne said, we've got Dr. Rosie Carey with us. She is a Ballito local, quite a formidable runner out on the trails as well. And we've just invited you here. What we're doing with our podcast is just interviewing interesting people who are within our circles. We were chatting a little bit off screen earlier about how close-knit Ballito people are and how we are able to leverage each other's talents, and we thought what a cool way to get you in here today and speak to us about one of the things that are on the forefront of everybody's minds, COVID, but also not limited to it. So Rosie, obviously being in medicine, you haven't really experienced lockdown as per se. You've been working all this time.
Yeah, so I have in many ways. The biggest impact it's had on me is actually just having to homeschool my children.
I can imagine that.
Juggling
and teacher.
And teaching.
How have you actually managed to do that if you've been in practice full time?
So the practice has been fairly quiet. People haven't been getting very sick and they've been putting off kind of elective stuff. So I've been working afternoons and teaching in the mornings. So it's been quite exhausting.
So when you say that the practice has been quiet, do you think that people are just nervous to come in?
Yeah, so there's a combination of things. The first is that they are nervous to come in, and I think things that they might have come in for before, they're now waiting. And with lots of things with medicine, I shouldn't say this, it's not good for business, but if you wait long enough, they generally go away on their own. So I think things that people might have rushed to see a doctor for, they've actually just got over on their own.
Okay.
And then also there has been a massive drop in childhood infectious diseases,
because they're not in schools.
They're not going to school. So a lot of what we see is colds and gastros and that sort of thing, and
the general stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of people obviously don't, they're so focused on COVID, you kind of forget that people still get sick.
Yeah, so that's I think a very important thing to maybe mention is that people are forgetting that if they feel like, for example, a lump in their breast, they actually should still come and get it checked out, because just because COVID's around, cancer is not going to suddenly go away.
Okay, you take a break, COVID, this is your time.
There are still medical things that go on, and it's important that don't come in for the small, insignificant things, but the important things should still be taken note of. Yeah.
Speaking on the word insignificance, obviously there's been a lot of back and forth with regards to COVID and how people view this disease, and some people are taking it more seriously than others. Like we see, some people are getting more relaxed with their PPE and starting to, forget about it because it's maybe not personally affecting them. But how serious should we be taking COVID?
To mask or not to mask? That is the question.
Difficult question. So let me just start off by saying the great irony of COVID is I've probably spent more hours studying COVID than any other illness in the whole of medicine ever, and I know the least about COVID. It's the most confusing, interesting phenomenon, and I think in many years we will look back and I think it's groundbreaking in many ways from a medical perspective, the amount of research that's being done on it. I think the general public isn't aware of it, but I literally spend an hour of my day every day trying to catch up on all the latest research that's coming out on COVID. So it is the most studied disease, and it's so fascinating to watch how it's unfolding. The honest answer is I actually don't know. I don't know any answers. I think what we have to do is we have to try to protect the most vulnerable in our society, because there are things that we do know, and we do know that COVID kills people who are, has a high mortality rate in people who are older.
Yes.
And people who have coexisting illnesses. So I think we need to focus on trying to protect those people. And then just a note on flattening the curve, everyone says, well, we're all going to get it at some point, so we might as well just all go out there.
Yes.
What they don't realize though is that by slowing it down, you do a couple of things. So the first thing is that you slow the rate of hospital admissions, because with COVID, if you get into hospital, it's not like normally with normal flu, you'll be in hospital for a week or whatever and then out on the ventilator for 4 days and then either dead or out.
If it gets to that stage.
If it gets to that stage. But with COVID, we're seeing that patients are needing long hospitalization. So they're filling up the hospitals. And if they do end up going onto a ventilator, they're on the ventilator for like 3 weeks. So the hospital system gets so backlogged very quickly. So I think, by having that social distancing in place and wearing your masks and that sort of thing, you are slowing that down. You're allowing the hospitals to take in patients and not get completely backlogged. And then the other thing you're doing is that every single day we're finding out more about COVID. So every day that passes, we're closer to treatments, and we're finding out ways to manage it. So before, we didn't realize the importance of high flow oxygen, and we didn't realize the importance of anticoagulants, and various things like that. So your chances of surviving if you get COVID now are much higher than they were a month ago, and people don't realize that. So by slowing the spread, we're allowing more people eventually to recover.
Actually get the treatment that they need.
Yeah. And then obviously a vaccination, but that's still coming.
You mentioned in that statement, the vulnerable people, and previously, like you said, our conception of vulnerable was limited to people who are elderly or already compromised, because that makes sense to us. We know that obviously their bodies are not as equipped to deal with the disease. But what we didn't know that we're finding out now is that COVID can kind of strike at random, and even like you were mentioning earlier, in children. And one of the things when COVID talk started happening that I felt was really misinformed was people were spreading statements like, we should just get it and get it over with. But because this is such a new disease, and as a doctor, you will know best, we don't know what the long-term repercussions are of these things. And it's not just about getting it, but what happens if it actually causes scar tissue on your lungs? What happens when you're 60 years old? Cool, I had COVID when I was 20, but all of a sudden my lifespan is decreased by 20 years. Are you seeing anything like that?
Well, it's early days
as it develops.
But we are, yes. So I've just read a study recently where they've shown that the vascular damage, so basically COVID does damage it damages the lining of the blood vessels, and that the vascular damage can actually persist for longer than the disease, and it can even be present in people who are asymptomatic. So you might think you are so strong and you've got COVID and you're fine, you didn't even have a cold, and 2 weeks down the line you end up having a stroke. So there've been this big increased number of strokes in young people and DVTs, deep vein thrombosis, and it's now being linked back to COVID. The same thing with kids. Initially we thought, kids are fine. It's now starting to come out that they are affected, and it's weeks or months down the line. There seems to be this multi-system inflammatory sort of disorder that they can get. So I think we know so little about it. We shouldn't jump in and just say, everyone should get it.
Yes.
No, we need to tread very carefully, because we don't know about it. And it's a new virus. It's an unstable virus. It's mutating, it's changing, it's doing things that we can't predict it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting talking to a medical person about it versus talking to like an economist about it. You know, if you think about it, like our government has had such a massive responsibility, and not only them, like scientists that made the call, because initially when scientists made the call, they made it out to be a lot more dangerous than what we've seen it to be. And that call, you know, was one of the reasons why government said, okay, we're calling it a pandemic. And lock up the country, and we're in lockdown now. And there's massive long-term side effects that has had, other than COVID. You know, people, you know, being affected negatively financially, but on many other different ways. I mean, we've seen so many divorces come through, and so many deaths of suicide, and different, you know, problems that have come from this. So it's going to be interesting to see how the whole thing plays out in the next couple of years. But one thing I wanted to touch on, like I know you said with the avascular, I don't know if you said necrosis, but it sounds like it's the same thing, like it's a dying of a...
No, so it's basically, it's a damaging of the endothelial lining, so you get microthrombi, so you get a hypercoagulable state, so basically little emboli.
So that sounds like it's something that is recoverable, like the human body is so amazing in terms of the way it's able to regenerate those types of cells, and it makes me think of something like the Chernobyl, where, you know, if you go in there now, and I don't know if you guys watched that documentary, but you see like plants growing and it's all changing, and it's similar to like our body, you know, and the planet, how it can just sort of regenerate those things.
It evolves
with giving your immune system everything it needs. So like good sunlight, and, you know, a good environment of fresh air, and the right type of exercise and nutrients and hydration and sleep and whatnot. So, and obviously the mindset will come into it as well, because like if someone has COVID and they believe that they're sick, or they're going to stay sick, or, you know, it's going to affect them negatively for a long time, the chances of them being negatively affected just goes up and up and up. So all these things are very interesting for us people in the industry of health and wellness, and we're wanting to see how we can also help and contribute and make a difference. Because one of the shocking things for me was, let me just rephrase that, I don't know if it was shocking. One of the great things I've seen here in Ballito was how many people are walking and running. Like before COVID, it's like no one did exercise, and now you go out on the promenade or wherever, and it's just like everybody's doing it. And it's like, this is awesome. This is how life should have been the whole time.
Perhaps it's been a big wake-up call.
Definitely.
You know, and the same with eating. Perhaps people now, you know, we know that obesity, if you're obese, you've got a much higher risk of getting seriously ill from COVID. So perhaps we needed a bit of a wake-up call to change our lifestyle.
And even like I've had friends of mine that were fit and like played first team rugby in school, and now, you know, 20 or not that long, but 15 years out, just completely let themselves go. And if all of a sudden with COVID phoning me and going, listen, how can I get back on track, and what do we do to this? So
that's fantastic.
Exactly. And just as we were chatting earlier about learning about wellness in general, and how you can look after this body.
And the spheres that all encompasses.
Exactly. And, you know, it's so empowering when you've got a healthy body. It's so empowering.
And I think you don't realize it sometimes until you have an unhealthy body. I see that very often. And I mean, I've been quite sick in the past. I had cancer many years ago, and I had to have a hysterectomy and various other things. And I remember thinking then that I will never, ever, ever do anything to jeopardize my health, because it's only when you can't exercise and you can't walk, and you know, to walk a kilometer takes huge effort, that you suddenly realize the value of being able
pulled
to
into
have
perspective.
a healthy body. Wow. And I think it's one thing I often focus on. We chatted earlier, just briefly touched on eating disorders, and I think it ties in with that, to try and teach people to love their bodies and to love them for their strengths and for the wellness that a healthy body encompasses is so important.
Let's touch on that point a little bit more. I remember reading something about an eating disorder. I can't remember if it's men and women equally so, but I can only imagine it would be. Once you have reduced your body to a certain fat percentage, it starts to affect the white matter in your brain.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
There's
irrecoverably.
a region in the cortex that's responsible for the way that you see yourself. And do you want to touch on that a little bit?
I don't know much about it, but I do know that yes, so you get a distorted body perception, and you actually can't think logically.
The body dysmorphia.
Yeah, but it's even more than that, because it's a structural, as you said, it's a structural change. So once you hit that point, it's very, very, very difficult to actually recover. And I don't know if you ever do fully recover. It's something that I think people constantly battle.
I think that will take us back to that balance of wellness, and like that's the basis of all these podcasts. Is like, how do you get that? How do you become the most centered? You know, we were speaking about generalism and rather than specialism, you know, and it's like just being the most generally well, you have to consider all those things, because at a point it has to be, there's such a psychological element to it as well. Like, is this person receiving more attention now? Maybe, and that's why they continue. You see it with the opposite as well, with the bigger execs, and they start to, a lot of those people have, because we've seen them inside here, you know, they have confidence issues, and because of that, you know, they need something to arm themselves to be able to go out in society.
Like a defense mechanism kind of thing.
Exactly. So yeah, it is very, very interesting.
I think sometimes it's also self-hate, you know,
and sabotage, and
it's so complex. And I think the psychological, as we spoke about earlier, the psychological aspect of health is huge. For me, it's far bigger than the physical aspect. It plays a massive role, and stress does as well. Which again, going back to COVID. You know, we can't underestimate the effect that the stress of lockdown has had on mental health.
Have you seen more patients coming through your doors where you can actually trace that back to a stress kind of disease?
Yeah, so it's a lot. Well, I've seen a lot of anxiety disorders that have really flared up, depression and anxiety during this time. And in fact, it's a lot of what I've been seeing.
What is anxiety? Like anxiety, the word gets thrown around all the time. But what is it?
Loosely, and how is it related to depression as well? You know, do they go hand in hand?
Yeah, so anxiety and depression are they're almost like two faces of the same coin. They're very, very closely linked. And sometimes during a person's life, they might have phases where their depression presents as depression or where their depression presents as anxiety. And it's largely a biochemical imbalance. So it's all to do with your neurotransmitter balance, serotonin, dopamine, or adrenaline. When those are not in balance, you tend to over-exaggerate things. So every little molehill looks like a mountain that's insurmountable. And then you can either respond with becoming depressed or becoming anxious.
And the difference between the two, I mean,
that's a good one first.
How would you say, because I mean, we've come to know them, like you say, as two sides of the same coin, but when you say one presents differently to the other, where's that distinguishing line? So
they're often overlapping features, and it's more a question of, is depression predominant at the moment, or is anxiety predominant?
Like depression is a state, anxiety is more like an emotion, like, and it's an experience, I think, if you break it up like that. But I wanted to think, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago even, you didn't hear the word anxiety like you are today.
But that's a result of our lifestyles. We don't live the way we should. We live very stressful, high-pressured lifestyles.
So then surely that is, when you say a chemical imbalance in your brain, got you, do we need to medicate for that?
We actually need to change our lifestyles.
Correct.
Because why did that chemical imbalance come about? Sure, there's a genetic component, and we know that. And so a percentage of patients will always need to be medicated. But what depletes your serotonin levels? What depletes those noradrenaline levels? And why are you not exactly? And that is our lifestyle so often. Sure, sometimes things can happen to you. If you have a very traumatic experience or something, I'm not talking about that. But if you're constantly living on adrenaline and constantly living in a state of hyper-awareness.
And depletion on the other side of it.
Exactly, and not ever refueling. You're going to end up with an imbalance.
But even on those ones where you said the traumatic experiences, it's hard to say that a traumatic experience will cause depression or anxiety when you look at people like Oprah Winfrey and the likes, and they used it in a different way. So it's almost like your perception of the experience will ultimately control your emotional response to it, and then the level of anxiety that you experience. And if someone gives power to the anxiety and is constantly, you know, focusing on that,
being in this anxious state, you know,
it's a choice ultimately. And well, it's a hard thing for me to say, but it's a choice for you to be able to empower it or not, and then also to be able to do something about it. So don't just loosely feel anxious and then not go and research, try, speak to other people, speak to professional people and say, let's get down to the bottom of it. First, do the basics. Am I eating correctly? Am I drinking correctly? Am I sleeping enough? Do I expose myself to sunlight? Am I, and you tick all these type of boxes first, and then
you can say, cool, well, I've ruled out all the obvious ones.
Yes.
So sometimes the role of medication is actually to get the person to that point where they can do all of that, because sometimes, and again, there have been sort of white matter changes. So the brain does change when you are depressed. There are structural changes. So sometimes you need medication for 6 months to be able to get you to the point to see that.
Yes.
To see, these are the changes I need to make in my life. And it's for that reason that you would never prescribe somebody antidepressants alone.
Yes.
Because then you're not actually addressing the problem. But yes, prescribe them to get them out of that state to the point where they can then start making all those lifestyle changes. Because that's eventually what's going to get them out of it.
I was actually listening to a podcast the other day specifically on debunking depression, or not debunking, but untangling depression and medication versus the basics being right. And you especially, you're a holistic doctor, you look at the bigger picture. I'm not saying that others don't, but there are people who just treat symptomatically and are not as invested.
It's easy to treat symptomatically, and it's easier for the patient for me to say, just take these.
Yes, you'll be fine.
Not to say, take these, but I want you to do half an hour of exercise every day, and I want you to see a psychologist and go through that traumatic event and work it out. That takes hard work. And people are much more amenable to quick fixes.
Definitely.
That's the most frustrating.
So
it sounds like everyone would want what we're saying, but they don't. It's like, give me the pill.
They want it without the hard work. Yes.
But specifically with regards to this podcast, these people spoke about how cool, you might be getting the correct medication, but what was the imbalance before? And they specifically spoke about mineral deficiencies and vitamin deficiencies, and I know that you in your practice specifically look at those things and see where the deficiencies may lie. Do you couple that with your treatment with
absolutely.
anxiety and depression?
For example, B12 deficiency, B deficiencies can cause anxiety and depression. So your anxiety and depression might just be a simple B deficiency, but then I can give you vitamin B drips, great, it will help you get out of it, but you need to look at why you've got those deficiencies in the first place.
Yes.
In a very small number of people it might be a malabsorption problem, but in the majority of people it might not be eating enough green leafy vegetables and healthy foods, so everything is interlinked, and you need to look at all of those factors to get a holistic approach to management.
And to actually cure or manage that disease and the symptom, essentially, because like you said, very often it's symptoms that are playing up, but what's the root cause behind that? And we were speaking about genetics, nature versus nurture, especially with regards to anxieties and that, and is it because we're feeding them, and how much of it is a genetic component? And you as well in your practice, you look at the bigger picture in terms of generational flaws, and you see people who are from multiple generations, and does that really help you treat that person holistically?
Absolutely. So I love it when I see like children and parents and grandparents, and you get to know a family, and you get to know what's going on in that family and what the dynamics are, and that can help you so much. And the reality is that sometimes people can get stuck in roles. So you can get somebody who gets stuck in the victim role, or who actually enjoys being unwell.
They don't want to get better.
They don't want to get better because within that family, perhaps they are, the way they get looked at or seen or acknowledged or whatever it is or cared for is by being unwell. So, that person's never going to get better no matter what I prescribe medication-wise, because subconsciously they don't want to get better. So, you need to know all the intricacies of a family to see that.
It's true. I wanted to just touch on the anxiety point in terms of the spectrum of it as well, and that sort of what you're saying now also makes sense if you think about what I'm about to say. But just to bring it into how I came about this, was I was researching on why some people have anxiety from CBD or THC. So it became a big thing because in sports, to reduce inflammation, you can take CBD drops, and some people were saying that increased or decreased. So I started researching a whole bunch of things. And basically, it's the same way that some people experience anxiety from caffeine. So like my sister, for example, she has a drink of caffeine and she gets anxious. You know, her heart starts racing, and too much caffeine, she's not in a good mood.
But that one coffee?
One coffee. And some people it may take 2, and some people it may take 3. But for me, you know, I can drink 6, 7 cups of coffee a day, and it will make me more focused, like razor sharp, and it has, I think, how I experience it, because yes, I can also experience, I start to speak quicker, or I'm more alert, and blah blah blah. It's a drug. I can feel that it's having an effect on me, definitely, but it's having a positive effect on me. I've never experienced it in a way where, it's having and let me not say never, because if you have too much coffee consistently over time, you can get dehydrated, or you also know that, we know that it starts to swell the receptors, and then you have less of a response to the caffeine. So sometimes you need a caffeine fast to get your receptor more sensitive to the caffeine again. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's a form of anxiety, if you think of it, or it's on that spectrum but it's just, I experience it here and she's experienced it there. And some people have said the same thing with marijuana, like even smoking marijuana, people explain it as paranoia. It's like, I've smoked some marijuana, but I'm so paranoid now. But then, you know, another way of looking at it is, if you're going and walking to your car at night, say you've just smoked a joint with your friends and now you've got to walk out to your car and you're very paranoid. But then someone else would explain it as, well, I'm hyper alert. It's not paranoid. And if I was, for example, drinking with my friends, and I walked out there, I would be stupid. You'd be clumsy. You wouldn't be thinking of where people are. And the point really is like, how much are you focusing on that anxiety?
Well, how much is your perception of the world as well?
Yes.
Well, exactly. But I think it's hard for me to explain it the way I really want to get the message across. But it's like, you need to be able to stress. So it's not a bad thing for you, because if a level of anxiety wakes you up and it's like, I've got to be doing something now, you know.
So I do explain that to patients. We can't live a stress-free life, because stress is a positive thing, and many things are positive stresses, and you do need to achieve things in life. I mean, it would be a really weird world if no one kind of achieved anything, or no one was driven.
That drive,
Yeah, so there's a very fine balance, and I think that's the key, is trying to find that balance, like with everything, trying to find that balance, because the other thing is that it's also about your perception. So same as pain, you know, no two people will experience pain the same, and I will never know what your experience of pain is. So I might, I ran 50 miles with appendicitis, it was a bit sore, I thought I had gastro. Somebody else might
drop down
and need a helicopter to take them off the mountain. So it's the same thing, it's a very subjective thing. So what you might experience as being super alert, other people might experience as being, dramatically, this is terrible, I can't deal with it, I need to curl up in a ball and go to sleep. So it's so much to do with our own personal resilience, our worldview, the way things interact, the way we interact with our environment. It's very, very much more complex than
it really is.
But then anxiety itself is also then experienced on that same kind of spectrum, and no two anxieties would be the same.
That's exactly.
I think building your confidence and the first thing is to understand why. When you know why you're feeling like that, you can start to problem solve it, and then maybe you'll also see it as, well, anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing, unless it goes into chronic depression and you're stuck inside something. But maybe it's like a early warning sign of, hey, I actually need to do something about this, you know.
Absolutely.
But then when does that conversion happen to chronic depression, you know? And this, you might be able to.
It's difficult to say. I think just touching on that, it's exactly what you said, and I think a nice way of looking at it is trying to be detached from it. So not identifying with your anxiety. So seeing your anxiety is there, but I'm not the anxiety.
Yes, I have anxiety.
Philosophical, but exactly. I'm experiencing anxiety, but I'm not the anxiety. There's a big difference, being able to detach yourself from your emotion. And I think that slip happens when you become the emotion. So you become, I am anxious, not I'm experiencing anxiety, this will pass. It becomes, I am anxious. Anxiety is me. and then it takes over everything. It's a very philosophical sort of debate, but I think if you can learn, it's the same with pain. If you can learn to detach from it, if you can detach from the anxiety, you can manage it far better because it's not you.
Yes, and you're not giving it power.
Exactly.
You know, that really is a great point. And I think the problem with most of these things that we've spoken about so far, anorexia and anxiety and depression disorders, is very much linked to people's perception of themselves. And I find personally, because I have struggled with anxieties and depressions, and one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn is how to detach, like you said earlier. And I think the biggest problem is that people don't learn that they are actually a separate entity, you know, within their consciousness. In Christianity, it'll be spoken about as the Spirit or the Holy Spirit, and in different cultures, a different word is used, but it all comes down to the same thing. And for me, I resonate with the word consciousness and being able to sit in the seat of my own consciousness and observe things.
Yes.
You know?
So I think I did a philosophy course, and I think that the word used was the observer. So there is something within you that can observe, and if it can observe the emotions, it is not the emotions. You cannot be that which you observe. So it has to be greater than that. It's something that goes beyond that. And this is getting very philosophical, but I do think if you can learn that you are greater than that, you are not
your disease.
You are not your disease, you are not your anxiety, you are not your body. You are something greater, far greater than that. It's so much easier to manage disease because it's something that's happening to a part of you and that will pass, and that is not you. It's not the essence of who you are. What you are is far greater than that.
Speaking of the essence of who we are and just getting onto the spiritual side of things, you know, we could sit and talk about consciousness here for the entire day. It's one of mine and your favorite topics, and where we've connected very well in the past.
You can't be well without being conscious.
100%.
That's the bottom line.
I think like what you said with the identifying and the observer, you know, we learned a lot about that with meditation practice and trying to sort of trying to take yourself as seriously as you need to only, but not over serious, and realizing that your body is literally just the driver for, you know, you right now. And if you can differentiate, distinguish, observe your mind as one thing, your emotions as another, your body as another, and then you find yourself sort of being able to observe is the right thing, and observe those things and judge yourself on it both critically and not too seriously too. Yes, exactly, with compassion, and to also be like, you know, maybe right now where I am in this point in my life is just the exact journey that I'm taking this time. And it doesn't have to be the next time, but it also doesn't have to be the same that my brother's taken or my father's taken or this one's taken, you know, which is a beautiful thing. And we were speaking about kids earlier, and I had that conversation with my wife last night just to say, you know, we can't expect our son to be us or be like us or anything like this. And even the things we like, it's not necessarily for us to say. We just have to give him the best opportunity to be a good human being by teaching the right value and belief systems, and then you let him go, and you know, you just guide him. You guide where you can when you think that he's either going to get hurt or but that's maybe not a bad thing either, you know, and
because there's lessons in those things as well,
and we watch and learn, you know. Who are we to say we know, because we know so little? So you watch, you learn as well from the kid.
100%. And for I mean, I can't relate, I'm not a parent as yet, but for you, a very new parent, and you a mum of, you said, a grade 5 and a grade 7-year-old. I refer to them as grade 5 and grade 7-year-olds. You know, that must have been a scary and also a very fulfilling journey to walk, and how to learn how to guide this other human being with its own consciousness and its own kind of mind through life.
It's the most difficult thing. You know, there's no manual, there's no handbook. It's so much about relinquishing control, and it's been a massive lesson for me because my personality is rather a controlling one.
How long did it take you to learn how to say that sentence?
Every day. But really, it is about giving up all control, because you can do what you can do, and you do it to the best of your ability, and then you, as you say, you put them out there, and you have no control over what they choose, what path they choose, and what they choose to make of their life. So it's about relinquishing all control and all attachment to the end product. But it's wonderful because
I like the word attachment, you know, because they are yours. They're gifted to you, but at the same time, they're their own human beings of the world, of this greater collective consciousness we all belong to.
You've just contributed to the biology and a little bit of the mind.
They're not, and I think parents can get very attached to their children's accomplishments or achievements, or to them not achieving.
I hope folks don't take offense, but like the parents on the sidelines sometimes in the sport, you need to sit down. You need to go to work. Like let your kids be kids there on their own. You know, it's too much.
Or living vicariously all the dreams that they maybe didn't accomplish. You know, now there's really my little mini me, and that's a hard burden for a child to bear as well. You know, and there's that expectation that you have to succeed in a certain thing. And we were talking about this also earlier offset, and how many opportunities kids have to interact with different experiences, and whether it be sport or cultural or whatever the case may be, where maybe only when you're older you get to learn, wow, I really actually enjoy music or poetry, but because I was tall I had the potential to be a netball player kind of thing, and my mum was, and my granny was, and that expectation is placed on that child. And I think that also confuses the child to think that, okay, I'm a performance and not necessarily an entity on my own.
Yes, definitely. Well, I think that's where a lot of childhood anxiety and stuff comes in, is that my parents only love me if I achieve, or that I am the sum total of this rugby scholarship. And
that's a terrible place to be in.
It's an awful place to be in, yeah.
With regards to spirituality and consciousness, and we've touched on kids now, I find it quite interesting. I was reading an article of yours on a trail running website called Coach Neville, where you referred to how you escaped to the mountains with your running, which we would like to touch on as well, but how you find your spirituality and your God. And I was specifically interested in the way that you phrased that and said your God, because God for me versus God for you versus God for somebody else may be a completely different being, but when you have children, it might be a question that's on your mind now as well. You know, how are we going to teach this little being about a higher power, and who is that higher power for you?
So I think it's a very personal thing, and each person in each family has to do what they believe is right by their child. But I definitely, there's no doubt in my mind that there is a higher power and there is a greater spirituality, and it just so happens that the mountain is the place that I connect with it. I find nature takes me to, it's my temple, I suppose, and when I'm in nature, and especially if I'm alone in nature, that's where I find it easiest to be.
The best connection?
Yeah, and to find that inner peace. And look, ideally I'd love to be able to find that inner peace everywhere. That's what one strives for.
In your practice.
Yes, exactly. But I just find that it's so much easier in the mountains, and it's funny because I'm married to a man who loves the sea, and for him it's the sea, and that's fine, and that's lovely. But I do think with children, I don't mind what religion they choose. I think religion is, and this is again just my personal opinion, but I think religion is very often a vehicle for, and it's a useful and wonderful vehicle for teaching good morals and good behavior. And I think if you boil the essence of every religion down to its truest form, it's
all
the
comes
same.
Together.
Of course it does. And I'm happy if my children know those true values. You know, if they can live a life of integrity and honor and respect nature and a greater spiritual being, then I'm happy. I don't mind what religion it is.
What it's called.
I don't exactly. I think it's far more important to be accountable at the end of the day, and to
be a good human.
To live a life of integrity. So that's really what I try and teach them, is that.
We've had so many conversations about this.
I just encourage people to learn all of the religions, you know, especially if you come from a strong, let's say, Christian background, then just go yourself. before you ask your kids to learn this way or that way, and read up on every single one of them, and then you'll notice the same similarities that we're speaking about. And then, you know, it's easy to identify the why do we learn it, and why is it so powerful, and why has it been around for generations and generations. And like, the lessons are great lessons.
Absolutely.
You can't take it away. They're great lessons. And us as human beings, like, acknowledging that, you know, there may be a higher power, or, you know, there is a reason for us to sort of develop ourselves as good human beings, to look after other human beings is a great thing. The planet is another great thing. And then maybe just trying to see everything as a bit more connected, and you're not so isolated and alone. And I suppose that's what religion gives you. It's like you're praying, you feel that there's someone out there looking out for you, you know.
And especially in religious structures, like, we might find more peace and connection alone, where other people need the other people around, and the community and fellowship.
Yes, yeah, and that's a personal.
And I get the same thing with you, Rosie. Like, I also love the mountains and even the ocean, but I find it best for me when I'm completely alone. And it's got nothing to do. I love going with people too, but when I'm alone, I have that sense of connectedness to something else, you know, someone else, or, you know, definitely
you're part of the
greater.
Yes, it's like a sense of calm, and like, you just at that point, you know, you've sort of in total control. You know, clear mind, and it's a great experience. If people haven't had it, like, I highly recommend, go out into the mountains, go for a hike, you know, get the shirt off and try it.
I definitely think it's the element of critical thinking, like you mentioned earlier, though, and that's a very underdeveloped skill in our society today, where we're presented with information and we just accept that information. And that may be so with some religions, especially where you see religious extremists, where they're so close to anything but what they believe. And that element of critical thinking, being able to receive information and ask, how do I actually receive this information? Is it true for me? Does it resonate with me? That's something that I definitely feel is lacking in my generation. I see that in my generation particularly, and maybe even in this digital age.
I think it's just lacking generally, and I think on all levels. So, and my husband always says that self-reflection is the most difficult thing to do, and it's the most critical thing to do in order to grow, because you cannot grow if you haven't got that ability to self-reflect. And that's in essence what it is. It's that ability to reflect on the information that you're taking in and how it's affecting you, because how I respond to something shows me a lot about what's going on in me. Now, if I respond with anger, why is that causing anger in me? Is it insecurity? I think sometimes with religion, you can get caught up in those things. You know, why is there this fanaticism? What is it? What is it? What is it? Why is it triggering that emotion in me? But it's a difficult thing to self-reflect, and perhaps that's why I love running alone in the mountains, because it gives me that time and space
to just be with your thoughts,
to self-reflect.
Reading as well. So running and reading for me is like, there's two things I wanted to say on your point with extremists. There's a guy named Degrasse Tyson. He's like a famous astrophysicist, and he's an incredible guy to listen to, but he'll speak about people who don't want to learn, who think they know it all, and it's like, if you're closed-minded like that, it's exactly the same as an extremist. And those people have often only heard one thing, and they're like, cool, that sounds great to me, I'll stick to that. That's know. But you've got to be.
It works for me.
Yeah, and you've got to be sort of at a point where it's like, cool, I've heard this is a great thing, I'll do it as long as I can, and then also if I learn something else, be open-minded to change. And people battle with that. Especially people, the longer you do it, you almost feel bad to change now. It's like, because I've been telling other people about this too, and I've like,
then you have to admit that
you were maybe wrong.
You see this in multi-level marketing companies all the time. I think everybody's been hit by a multi-level marketing company at one stage, or even like tried some of them. But, you know, it's just the worst thing when people are trying to sell you something that's not going to work, and then you've got to sell it to your family and friends, and but then, you know, looking back into it, and you go, but this person's done it for these 10 or 15 but so, you know, look at what everything else is, you know. But
they've never questioned, you know, do I actually believe in this thing that I'm selling? And maybe some people get stuck in that kind of thing because that's their lifeline. They may hate the thing that they're doing every single day, but I think that it goes back to people having a strong value system from the beginning and how moldable you are. I think in actual fact, if you are so content within yourself, it's easier to be open-minded.
Of course it is, because you're not threatened. That's exactly what I was saying about insecurity. If I'm very confident in my values and my core beliefs, then of course you're open to new stuff, because you know that you'll take the good from it, and it won't threaten you. But as soon as you're insecure, everything is a threat, and fear is such an awful way to live.
And so many people are living in fear.
To make decisions based on fear, to let fear drive your behavior, it's horrible.
And like fear, we know we don't make good decisions there. We're in that fight or flight mode, you're just not thinking clearly. It's the wrong time to make decisions. It's interesting. Let's talk about running.
Yeah, let's actually go into that. So, Rosie, on the spiritual side of things, you said that you escaped to the mountains, and we've gotten to know you as a formidable contender on the 100-miler circuits. And I would like to know, how did you find yourself deciding for the first time, I'm going to go and run 100 miles, 160 plus kilometers?
It's like two comrades. Are you running comrades this weekend?
Oh no, I'm not.
You should enter. Just do a virtual one. You can do 5Ks if you like.
I can easily do 5Ks, but you don't want to get me started on why I'm not doing comrades.
Okay, let's talk about that.
I've got a moral dilemma about comrades at the moment.
I want to pack into that.
I won't talk about that now. Why 100 miles? Because I like to challenge myself. So I always like to see what I can do, I guess. So it was just answering, can I do it? Yes, actually I always knew I could do it, but I wanted to see where it took me doing it. So my next one will be 200 miles.
What had you done before the 100 mile where you felt, okay, I reached my max?
No, I've never felt as though I reached my max. I think that's actually what maybe
keeps
that's the answer. There we
coming
go.
Back.
I want to see what my max is.
So will you be happy if you carried off on a stretcher and be like, okay, well clearly 200 miles wasn't for me?
I don't know. I'd probably go back and try and do it again without getting carried off on a stretcher.
Hopefully that would never happen. Hopefully that would never
a couple
happen.
times.
Oh really? On some of your races? What has been your worst experience in that case?
Comrades 2013, that hot year.
Yes.
Oh my word, I think I've vomited from about halfway and was pretty much hallucinating by the end. That was a horrible one. And then I've had a Sani stagger where I think the altitude got me from like 10 k's in, and I came in and I was fit at the time. I was expecting to do a really good time, and my husband was waiting for me at the end, and shame, he was so worried. Eventually I came in and I couldn't even talk to him.
Were you walking? Were you on your feet still at the stage?
Yeah, no.
Not in the stretcher.
No. But so there have been a few times that things have gone wrong, mostly vomiting.
But that also just shows you, and I mean, if I can brag with you, you said the Sani Stagger. You are someone who has experience with the Sani Stagger. You have placed second in
oh my goodness, you really did do your research.
In 2016. And now, was this experience before or after that?
So it was actually before that, and I was actually fitter than that.
Crazy, so, right?
Yeah.
It just shows you.
You can't, again, you can't have attachment to the outcome, because I was far fitter the year that I had an awful Sani than the next year that I went on to come second. So.
But it's that whole holistic sphere of well that we keep coming back to, where the recipe was right, you did all the right things, you said that you were fitter. Maybe, what could have gone wrong there, you maybe don't know, but maybe there was an aspect of that wheel of wellness where a cog was out.
Probably. I probably went out too fast because I knew I was in good shape. So, you never know these things. And maybe I need to learn a bit of balance. Maybe doing these long distances is not balanced. But for me, it's something that I love. So
do you still compete?
I haven't for the last year, but I'm would like to again next year.
Itching to get
I've
back.
had a good break, so I think a break is sometimes important.
Do you have a training schedule? Like, how do you train
Not
for
at the
100 miles?
moment, but when I do start competing again, then I will.
What would it look like?
100 miles is a long distance, so it's a lot of time on your feet. I always think that anything over 60 kilometers is more mental than
taxing.
physical. So I kind of know with the 100 miler, if I can just keep going, I'll be all right. But it's a mental strength. It's that knowing that you're going through pain, but it will get better, that it will pass, and that I don't think I'd ever do 100 miles on the road. Because for me that's not enjoyable.
There's no
it's not
scenery.
What I love. I love the connection that I get with nature when I do it on trail.
So that's
and I
feeding
love
you all
running
along
through
the way.
night when it's just me and this expanse of sky and the night sound. So that feeds me. That kind of that motivates me and drives me.
With the mental training, and that's a super interesting side of it for us. And I think anything, whether it's the 60 kilometer mark or the 5 kilometer mark for some people, there are mental barriers in place. And you're a very mentally and well-balanced, strong person, but are there any mental exercises that you do as part of your training when you are preparing for a race like that?
No, they're not, and I probably should do. But I think I do a lot of mental training
every day,
just all the time. Yeah,
you're a conscious person.
I think I try to be
not self-conscious, conscious.
But no, and I think also there are things in my life that have obviously trained me. So I did so many nights in hospitals in my internship and stuff. So,
on your feet.
Yes, and you're awake the whole night, and you I think every time you achieve something or overcome something that you think you can't, you can pull from that. So, I can be in a very bad place and I can think, but listen, you've put in central lines after being awake for 36 hours. You can do this. You've run 50 miles with appendicitis, not that I'm saying anyone should, but it's okay. Yes. So you can get through this. You've done this before. It's fine. You can do it. And I think having that knowledge gives you that confidence to
that power to continue.
And I guess also in many ways I don't allow myself to not succeed. So it's just not an option.
I think that comes down to your mindset. Like if you think of someone that went through that same medical training and they were up 36 hours and they get home and they're like, that was the worst day of my life, and they look at it as being the negative, then going on in their life they could say, well, I'm not good at anything now because I was drained, I was tired, I was this.
Right.
But then you have someone that's like, all those things made me stronger, and it was training, and I look at it as you have to look at it as a positive,
Yeah, you're right. So where does that come from? And I suppose maybe I should thank my parents.
But maybe I think I just wanted to check with you because when you were speaking earlier, and I was like, well, when I'm running, this is what I do. So like when I'm running, like specifically far or doing endurance things, I often think about how beautiful everything is. So I'm focusing on the beauty of,
and not how tired.
It's a form of meditation. You almost don't even feel your body. You're not watching like any Garmins or anything like that. It's like you just totally you try not to be running
in your body.
You try not to be
I'm actually getting goosebumps just listening to, but that's exactly why I do these runs, is for that feeling where you're just focused on the absolute beauty around you. And it's such a high. And maybe, going back to our religion, maybe that's the Holy Spirit, being filled with the Holy Spirit, that feeling of this incredible beauty around you where you're out of your body almost.
That detachment from this being my physical self.
And then this sore toe and this
is not me. This sore toe, these tired legs are not me. It's just something that I'm feeling.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden you start to feel and you're like, well, I need to think of something else now. I'm tired of watching these trees. My quads are cramping.
I need food.
Give me an eagle or something to stare at. come on, Earth.
Any wild horses
Come
around
on,
for
world.
the taking?
That's when you need like a black-backed jackal to come and give you a big
Do you remember
fright.
when the three of us were doing that like massive hike in Lesotho, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a Basotho boy and a donkey come?
It was.
And you're like, let's go talk to that guy for a while. Can't speak at all, but
What? How many thousand feet above sea level?
3,000
Yeah.
meters.
And we were staying in a lodge, right? So we went hiking in the backyard of the lodge kind of thing, or a national park. And you would not expect to find a human being that isn't staying there all the way up at the top of the mountains. And it was crazy because we had...
Those guys don't know what COVID is.
No.
Still not. Definitely.
They're not going to get it though.
No,
I don't think it's
definitely
going
not.
there.
But what was crazy for us was how he knew the mountains, you know, and we saw that in the sense that, remember, we couldn't speak to him, he can't speak English, we just were happy to see each other, but we ran down that mountain, we paced it, and we probably took about hours and hours to get up and ran down within an hour. And this guy's walking with his donkey, and we stopped for water, and he's right behind us. He didn't run. He didn't run.
Where did you find an elevator going down?
Where did you come from? But I mean, those people, can you imagine their connection to the mountains over there? And I often wonder with, you know, in a society where you are privileged and you have different problems and maybe more of them, and I often wonder with more basic societies and their spiritualities and their religions, if they know how lucky they are to just always be immersed in those things, they probably don't even see it as any difference.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think perhaps you always hanker for what you don't have. It's part
true.
of human nature.
We can have it.
Yeah.
We can have it.
We could
But
move there
the thing
right now.
is, well, not even, you don't have to move. You just have to change your mindset.
You have to change your...
You have to be like, stop looking at people driving Porsches and this and that, and you know, you could do it, definitely.
What do you
right
value?
here.
What's important
But in
to
a way,
you?
I kind of hope that COVID... I felt
I think
for
it
a little
has.
while like it was giving
Brought
us a bit of sense of that, like
back to basics.
yes, where's my food coming from, and what are the basic values? You know, instead of rushing around the whole time getting kids to this extramural and that one and this, and
They actually have to spend time.
spending time as a family together and being at home doing our own
Things.
work.
Yeah, feeding
Yeah.
yourself, cleaning your own
Exactly.
home, decluttering things.
And what a wonderful, and this sounds bizarre, but it was a wonderfully empowering feeling to clean my own home.
Nick still mocks me. I was
and
standing
all of the kids to help.
washing dishes,
Yes.
and I was like, I actually love this.
It is, it's wonderful.
I loved it in the first week. I love it less now, but it was
It's a great feeling of
empowerment and pride in what you've been able to achieve, because we're stuck on this roller coaster of achievements. I really do feel this, and that's where we were pre-COVID, and our whole lives were about leveling up, getting to the next hurdle. And when last have we had the opportunity to sit in our achievements, our homes, our families, the things that we have created for ourselves, and introspect and be a part of it?
Yeah.
You know, you have these wonderful homes that you guys put so much effort into and decorate, and you hardly ever spend time there.
I felt so much of that, and I keep wondering how many people are going to carry on with that once life is back to normal, and how many people have already forgotten it now that we're on level 3. You know, how much of that has already been lost. And they're treasured moments, they really are.
Yeah.
And we
It's
saw that
about-
with the gym, like how many people chose to stay at home and train instead of being able...
I think the gym industry will change.
Yeah.
Like for us, sadly, like I think our facility is small and niche enough to be able to make a business out of it. But I think more and more people will change the way they do exercise
And
like,
the way they work.
Yeah, well, that was the first point I wanted to say, was if it was sustainable financially, more and more people would just live from home, or if they found a sustainable solution to it. Because like, when last did you guys go camping? But like camping, your whole day is just, I'm washing this, then it's about cooking this, and there's like there's hardly any time to do, and you realize that now as well. You're like, you wake up in the morning, you start cleaning, and then you're cooking, and then you're cleaning again, and then you this, and it's like, well, you can't do that living the life we live now with this, because I mean, you're not working, let's be honest, if you own your own business anyway, it's not an 8-hour day. You're looking at a 10, 12, 14-hour day, you know, and it's just where's the time to cook, clean, or even be with your family, which is very important. Like the cleaning side is a humbling, and it's this experience that sort of cements everything together of a greater appreciation for your food, I think.
Absolutely.
You're like, well, I appreciate having this plate now to eat this food on.
That I now have to clean, that I didn't think about beforehand, because
and also I don't need so much.
Yes.
Actually, all the stuff is just extra stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we only need 4 plates.
I got 20 plates inside.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought.
I need to get to breaking some plates around this place.
You only need
Good pasta.
So Rosie, the conversation has gone around the table a few times today already, and we've touched on many amazing topics. And one of the biggest questions I have on my mind with all the stuff that you're involved in, with your running, with cleaning your plates and teaching your kids, you know, where have you found the time to write and to publish books? And what have you published? What do you enjoy writing about? And where has that journey taken you in your life and career?
So I've always written. I actually did a master's in creative writing after I did my medical degree. So I had a bit of a moment. Am I in the right field?
Wow. Polar opposites.
Left, right brain.
Exactly. I had a bit too much on the one side. I needed to balance it out a bit.
I need to be creative.
But writing is a great tool for me. So it's one of the ways that I make sense of the world and make sense of things that are going on around me. And I guess it's one of the ways that I self-reflect is by writing. So I've always written, and I do a lot of it. And the books kind of came about as a bit of I suppose, therapy in a way. So my first 2 novels were based on my years of community service and internship and just all the things that I had to see and deal with, because they obviously were quite harrowing years. So they're fiction, they're novels, they're easy reading, they're not biography style. No, they're almost like, I suppose, Grey's Anatomy in South Africa, but deeper. But based on your real life experience. Based on my experiences. So, I mean, those just kind of like flew out of me because it was. You needed to release that. To release it, yeah. And it was how I kind of made sense of it and dealt with it. The third novel was a bit different. It's more of a social commentary. But again, it was me trying to make sense of. I moved to Belito, and it was a very different kind of lifestyle. So I came from Cape Town. Very different kind of lifestyle, and I saw a lot of social discrepancy in kind of these estates, and then the people that work in the estates, and so it's a bit of a commentary on that. It's quite a dark satire, but it was again me kind of making sense of what was going on around me. Also fictional, or? Yes, fictional. It's like a murder mystery thing. It's very different, very different to the first 2. And you said you published under your maiden name, which is? Yeah, so my full name is actually Rosamond, and it's Kendall. So, yeah. So that's how we can find your books. I can escape. I can hide away. Rosamond Kendall. That must look quite interesting on your certificates. Or did you have it published as Rosie? No, it's Rosamond Kendall, yeah. Okay. And you still write today? So yes, I still write. I've been blogging through this whole, I kind of started a lockdown diaries on your website, Thrive, right? No, this was just... Oh, a personal one as well. Yeah, so I've been blogging just about the experiences that I kind of wanted to keep a record of what was happening. Like a virtual diary. Yeah, so I wanted for me to be able to look back and remember what I'd done with the children, and remember things like cleaning the house, and just make sure that I didn't forget the lessons that I'd learned, but also because I still don't know where COVID's going to go, and I don't know if one day I'm going to look back and think, oh geez, I wish for those days of sleeping, and I'm now working 14-hour shifts in hospitals with people dying, or I don't know where it's going to go, and I didn't know, so I kind of wanted to document it. That experience.
Rosie, that's like one of the biggest fears, I think, with most people. When you say this thing brought out fear, was like, how is anybody sure we come out of it? Yes. We all going, okay, next year it's going to be fine, there'll be a vaccine and that, but then there's the other side of, I think everybody had to have that thought, is like, does the way we change forever? And I think it does. And I think it does to those points, but like, when you're going back in history and you look at all the viruses that have come, or even all the wars that have come, you know, it's like there's these common trends that are happening and will continue to happen. And it's like we've got to sort of, it's another experience for us, and it's an opportunity to learn. And I love what you're doing, like by documenting it and being able to reflect on those lessons that you learned. Then it's like an essential part of growth, isn't it?
It is, I think. So for me it is, and that's, I think that's why I find the time to write, is because it's mind clearing for me. So, and there's so much uncertainty around COVID, and one would think because I'm a doctor that there's less, and in fact there's actually more. I think sometimes I'm very jealous of people who know a little, because I think then
ignorance is bliss.
Simple, you know. But it's the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And the more you realize how little you actually know. So you know, there's so much uncertainty.
That could breed anxiety as well, just getting stuck into that loop of, I don't know, I want to know, I'm scared, I'm scared, I don't know enough, I don't want to know anymore.
And also I think because COVID affects me on so many levels, because obviously economically it's also affecting me. I mean, my practice has been dead quiet, we've had to
You said you're working half days.
So there's a part of me that's looking at it from the point of view of a person having their own business that's just recently opened, not the best timing in the world. There's a part of me that's looking at it as a mom. There's a part of me that's looking at it as a doctor. So I kind of wanted to make sense of all those different aspects. So the blogs are, I mean, I was writing blogs more regularly. Now that things are a bit more back to normal, I'm trying to write out when they're kind of big issues. So I think, like recently I just wrote about the social distancing, and I wrote a thing about masks. So it's kind of things that affect lots of people, but also that I'm feeling uncertain about, that I don't know if it's
that some people might be able to resonate with as well.
Yeah, I think so. I've had a lot of positive response with people saying, you know, it's so nice, it's so refreshing to hear somebody that's honest about their uncertainty and what they're feeling. And
I do feel like you do act as a bit of a role model, you know, or for me.
Don't say that.
And no, but it's true, you know. But you not just limited to your running, but being a strong and empowered woman, and knowing that you deal with fear as well. You know, sometimes you can look at these people in bigger and higher places than yourself, and you think, oh well, you know, you live in Zimbabwe. What's the problem? You know, it's nice over there. Like, what are you complaining about? But bring it back to basics. We're all dealing with fear. We're all dealing with uncertainty. And if you can see that that's somebody else's reality as well, and especially someone like you say who has the medical knowledge, no amount of information is going to make this go away.
No, and
you know? Or the right kind of information, at least, until we have answers. None of us have answers.
No, that's the thing, and I think that's such a lesson to learn from this. For me, it certainly is that they're not always answers. And sometimes you have to learn to be comfortable in the uncertainty.
100%.
So it's really nice. It's easy to be comfortable when there are clear-cut answers. And yes, this is what you do, this is what you take, this will sort it out. But to live with that uncertainty, and as a doctor to feel it's okay to say, well, I actually don't know. It's been a big lesson for me, but it's been a great one. It really has been a good one.
We all need to have a paradigm shift and see it almost like we don't know when we're going to, or if we're ever going to be hit by a car, but we could be.
Yes.
And if we had to live with that uncertainty every single day, it would kill us and it would freak us out. And we've adopted this, and it's okay to be so uncertain about it, you know. And I think it was because of the fear factor pushed into us about it being a lot worse than it is. But, you know, accepting that you're not in control of everything is a big thing.
And there's a big release from that as well.
It is, of course.
And then knowing what your part. So some of us are going to have a bigger part in fixing this problem than others. You know, I'm not going to be able to solve COVID-19. I'm not smart enough to come up with a vaccine.
On the vaccine, yeah.
You
know, that's not my part.
But you could help.
Correct. Where I can help,
yes,
you know,
exactly.
And the differences that we can make just among the people in our little ecosystem environment and whatnot is really what's important now, I think. And those lessons are
it is so important.
And I think bringing it back to the whole conversation that we've had yet today, and the take-home message that people could take from this, like you say, is how can we be of importance, and how can we actually help our fellow man, whether it's COVID or not. And I think that in general, if people learned how to be consciously aware of themselves, they could deal with their challenges in life so much better, from the space that, you know, they're not internalizing that I am not COVID, I am going through a pandemic, yes, but I'm still separate from that. Yes, I'm feeling anxious, but I'm not anxiety itself. And I really do feel like that's an empowering message, that if people could, however you learn that
go run and
consciousness, go run and go read doctor's orders, literally.
And I think for me, another big thing that I just need to bring up, because it's one of the biggest principles that I try and live my life by, is to have compassion. So for me, that is such a part of what I try and practice all the time, every time. And I, like in every interaction, I try and feel that, because I think that I can't save the world. And it used to really, when I was doing my internship, we were working in government hospitals. There's so much, you feel often that you can't do anything. You feel so helpless
and defeated by that.
Yes, but one of the biggest lessons I learned, and it's in one of my novels, I can't remember which one, but it was that by meeting the need of a single person, by having compassion for a single person, you are making a difference, because there's such a ripple effect. You know, you change one person's life and it just goes out like that. So I think if we can all meet things with equanimity and with compassion and live that, the world would be a very different place.
And self-compassion as well. You know, we're talking about people becoming conscious of who they are. But if you've never had compassion for yourself, and you're living in this awful like hate cycle, whether it's body hate or anxieties about the world or about your future, financial, you need to have compassion for yourself first and acknowledge, okay, I am going through a pandemic. You know, we see these things on Instagram and Facebook, and maybe we scroll past them, but it's real, and it's real medicine and compassion medicine. I again listened to a podcast the other day, and the emphasis was on the relationship between the healthcare provider and the patients, and how that compassion, that understanding, that trust is more important than the medicine itself. And I mean, that was the claim.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You'll have your comments about that as a doctor, but I feel like it makes a huge difference.
Of course it does. It makes a massive difference. And I think that's one of the biggest aims of our practice and our ethos in practicing, is to develop those kind of relationships, because you're right, that's part of the treatment. And I mean, I'm not talking about like somebody falls off their bike and breaks their arm, whatever, but even then, you know, understanding what the parents are feeling, it's all part of what creates balanced healing and wellness. It's part of the pillars of wellness.
Yeah, and like the guy could have been on a scholarship and had a really important game that he was playing for, and the arm being broken is more than just the arm being broken. Now it's his opportunity for this loss, and you've got to consider those things. And you being the healer you are is why you have adopted that, you know, component of compassion as like your key whatever you call trait.
I think it's also value. Because it's one thing that you can do. You can choose. You know, I can't choose whether people take tablets or whether they, you know, but I can always choose to have compassion and to treat people with kindness and compassion. So it's a nice, and again, I think perhaps that's one of the biggest things that's come out of this talk is the person's ability to choose. So we each as individuals have the ability to choose the way we respond to anything. It's actually one of the things my poor children have to listen to me say the whole time.
Life's about choices.
I always tell them, the only choice you have in life, the only free choice you have is how you respond to things.
And that is a super empowering
it is. It's such a, you know, I'm so cross, I'm so unhappy. Well, you're choosing to be unhappy. And it is. I mean, it's a choice. So I think that maybe the biggest thing that we can take home from this is that we each, as individuals, the only free choice that we have is how we choose to respond to everything that happens, because things are going to happen regardless. You know, nobody lives a perfect life.
Yeah.
But you do live a perfect life if you choose to meet everything that happens to you with equanimity.
Thank you, Rosie.
Thanks, Rosie. This has been a great chat.
That was such a powerful message. I don't think that we should end off in any other way. But yeah, we just want to wish you luck with the rest of what you are dealing with within your practice and at Thrive, and just congratulate you on the great job that you are doing with the people that you are seeing, and we'll see you on the road.
Thanks, and you guys as well.
It's been lovely having you.
Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Dwayne.
It's a wrap.